Welcome to today's panel webinar, Thriving in Turbulence. And today we will explore how AXA, XL and Deutsche Telekom are taking the lead with smart talent strategies. I'm Satinder Lahori and I'm based in the marketing team supporting today's webinar. And firstly, I think it's good morning, good afternoon and good evening to a number of you because it is a global panel webinar and I understand we're joining from all parts of the world today. So we really appreciate that. Now, just a little bit of housekeeping from us. So today's session is a 60-minute session. So we have a 50-minute panel discussion where the moderator will ask our two panel guests questions. Now, please feel free to ask our moderator and panel guests questions throughout this webinar using our chat function. We will do our best to answer the questions during the Q&A session, which is allocated for 10 minutes at the end. If we're unable to do so, should we run out of time, then we will get back in touch with you via email and provide you the answers directly. Feel free to take notes. Please enjoy and take notes. We are actually recording this webinar, so it will be available for you to watch back on demand, and we will let you know when that is available via email. Now, I am going to introduce today's moderator, who is Sam Schlimper. Sam serves as the Managing Director of Randstad Advisory, where she spearheads the strategic workforce transformation initiatives, guiding global clients through complex talent and organizational challenges. Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Satinder, and thanks. I know that my surname is tricky, so I appreciate you went slowly over it, so I appreciate that. I'm not sure if anyone can see me, but I know you can hear me. It's not a bad thing that you can't see me. Really looking forward to today's session. Welcome, everyone. Cannot wait to hear your questions, as Satinder said in the chat. We will definitely leave time to have the conversation because this is really about sharing and learning from each other, which is always what these webinars are about. So looking forward to it. Joining me today, and I have the privilege of having the moderator role with two great HR leaders. First of all, David Jones. David is from AXA XL. He is, part of his role is definitely the championing of skills-based transformation and moving the organization towards skills-based, looking at transferable skills, internal mobility, future-proofing careers, and all the things that go with that in an ever-evolving market and its demand. So welcome. And then we have Miriam. Miriam is a talent acquisition expert. She leads Deutsche Telekom's talent acquisition strategies and focuses on attraction and selecting the top talent to drive the company success forward. So both of you in really important roles in your organizations in turbulent times, which gives us lots of challenge and lots of opportunity. And we certainly, in my job, when I speak to lots of different clients across the world, have that as a theme. It's turbulent, it's complicated, it's fast-paced, and it's scary, exciting, challenging, all of those good things that come with turbulent times. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how you are dealing with that in your worlds, and then hearing how the audience would like to ask us questions specifically as we go through the journey. David and Miriam, and maybe David, I'll start with you because you're first on my screen. Do you want to do a quick introduction other than what I've said about you at AXA XL?
That was very kind of you, Sam. Thank you very much. Yes, so hello, everybody. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to be part of this webinar. I hope it's going to be very useful for you. As Sam said, I am responsible for all aspects of talent management and employee experience at AXA XL, which is a division of AXA, which many of you may know. AXA XL is a specialty part of the AXA family. We're about 10,000 colleagues worldwide in about 30 different countries. So we truly are a global organization that is really trying to grapple with some of the big themes that Sam Sam's just mentioned in terms of the political environment that we're in, the pace of change that's happening, how do you deal with AI, etc., and how does that then ultimately impact on our ability to attract, retain, develop talent so that we can achieve the success we want to have as an organization. So hope we can share some of our experiments, some of the work that we are doing, some of the hiccups that we've had along the way as part of the conversation. So looking forward to spending some time with you. I think Sam might be dealing with a Winston or a Ace, so I don't know whether Miriam, you want to go.
Yeah, Miriam, if you'd like to please give yourself an introduction.
Yeah, I can do. So I do lead the recruiting at Deutsche Telekom. This means anything around operational recruiting up to strategies, global rollouts, but also onboarding pieces, as well as diagnostic procedures we need to find the best talents. I've always been in the talent acquisition space at Siemens Energy, and big pharmaceutical company Merck. And today, let's dive deeper into what exactly this means in turbulent times to hire the best talents.
Yeah, I believe Sam, are you with us or are you occupied?
Should we go with the first question?
Yeah, let's just go with the next question. So if we go to the first question, I think this is key to this particular webinar. If we have a look at the statistics that we worked on for our talent trends report. So we found that 90% of talent leaders believe the work they are doing is preparing the organizations for the future. And I guess the question to our panel today, so maybe David, you want to take this first. How are geopolitical, technological, and economic instability impacting your business during these disruptive times? What conversations are you having, and what approaches are you taking as a result?
Lots of big conversations there certainly are being had. And if I think about us as an organization, as I said, we're in about 30 different countries across the world, and we're being affected by actually each and every single one of those things. So geopolitical instability that's happening in the US, technological disruption, i.e. what really is the impact of AI going to have on us as how we actually manage and automate complex risk, and how then do we actually make money as we enter what we call in insurance into a soft market, i.e. there is much more competition in the marketplace than ever previously before, so therefore the rates that we once experienced before are suppressed. So we have some disruption that's going on there. That also, we have higher expectations from our clients and our customers as well as to what they want from us in terms of user experience, in terms of the services that we provide, and also the disruptions that's going on in the market. So those are the kind of conversations that we are having at this point in time. And certainly how we're trying to approach that as a talent management and employee experience team is really trying to get people to think differently about how we approach the problems that we have. How do we utilize our workforce in a different way by getting a greater understanding of what talent we have, what skills we have in the organization? And then actually, where can we also find new talent into the organization where we haven't traditionally sought for before? Insurance has a little bit of an image problem in many ways. I know that's probably too harsh a word, and I think it's quite a cool industry, but generally people don't see it as something that is particularly attractive. And certainly, you know, all organizations that are trying to be much more tech savvy, and you then talk to somebody in the technology field and you say to them, would you want to come in and join insurance? They're saying to us, it's not particularly attractive to me. And also some of our legacy systems as well are becoming relatively outdated. So what we're trying to do is say, how do we really foster new talent pools for us to search from? How do we create opportunities for us to bring in more junior talent into the organization that we can train up and develop in the right way? But also, how then do we give some certainty and also some assurance to our hiring managers where we are taking folks from a different talent pool, that they do have necessarily the spec-based skills that we need. So those are some of the flavors that we're having. We're also really trying to embrace, as a HR function, a much more data and insight driven conversation. So gone, I think, are the days where we said how many people you want to hire, where we're actually going in with some workforce analysis, which I know we'll talk about a little bit later, to say, here's actually what would happen if we did nothing. Here's what some of the drivers that we're seeing from the external the external force. And here are some of the things that we're also noticing that we really do need to address in terms of skill shortage, etc. So we're trying to have those conversations to be much more specific about those types of challenges that we are facing at this point in time. But they are challenging, and certainly I think from a HR function, we've got some way to go to really develop that into a really mature offering and really mature service for us, whilst at the same time coping with change and disruption in ourselves and working at a pace that I think we're all experiencing, which is really feeling quite unprecedented at this point in time. But more sophisticated conversations, really trying to get to the heart of issues and really using data and insight to drive deeper, much more robust conversations.
That's great. That's a very valid point. And I think given the current climate, I think people are looking at disrupting traditional HR models. And you've kind of touched on that a little bit in terms of looking at different ways of sourcing talent. Can you give an example of how you are currently doing that? You touched on looking at the youth and, sourcing younger talent pools. Can you share an example with us today?
Well, what I would say is we are trying to take a skills-based approach to all hiring, and actually being agnostic of age or any other kind of different demographic, in saying, how do we really use skills as our superpower to find the people that have the baseline capabilities? And what's really interesting, these are capabilities that are actually centered around human skills rather than technical knowledge. How do we assess them in the right way so we've got confidence they've got the skills and the aspiration to come and join us? And then we actually activate our learning and development team to really then make sure that we fill those gaps and fill those quickly. And certainly I think, what's really clear about some of the analysis that we are doing is actually when we get that right, when we actually source and hire people with the people and business skills that they may have actually received from a completely different industry, and we train them well, we actually the data is telling us that they actually are more engaged and also higher performing. And I think that's really interesting because we've now got enough run and enough data to actually begin to have those proof points to help us to be able to really then take a very different approach to whom we hire, rather than relying on traditional methods of education or experience, etc., or previous industry experience. And that's creating a relative disruption in the organization, but I think it's a positive thing also as well. Not only just for us as a firm, but also from a social mobility perspective, and also from us actually the contribution we add to the society at large.
Satinder, I am back. Thank you so much.
I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you. You did a great job. You can carry on. I just say I did have disruption with my dogs. I then put myself on mute and couldn't get off mute, so apologies. But I was listening to what you had to say, David. I think it's interesting. We're going to talk a little bit about skills later, but it's fascinating. Miriam, in terms of going back around the conversations that are happening in your organization, we talk about technology turbulence, and David, you touched on it. There's geopolitical, there's economic, or there's all of those things. What kind of conversations are coming to you in your organization, and therefore what kind of approaches from a HR and talent acquisition perspective are you thinking about?
So a lot of conversations are going on also at Deutsche Telekom. And what we see here is that, especially from an economical point of view, we see shifting markets. So moving to other countries, moving to like nearshoring and offshoring. And this is a tremendous shift we're seeing. On the other hand side, the one thing that really keeps us busy, and you touched on it already, is this point of internal mobility. So when looking for this skills topic, we see that we need to get better in understanding what skills do we already have with us, and how can we kind of leverage them more or upskill them. And I can give also a quite practical example on that. When looking into my department, we see already those discussions, if it's from a technology point of view, happening. Because I, for my example, was not aware of that I might need in recruiting a software architect. So the technology is already with me. And this already drives me to a skill shift that I need to really face, and I need to figure out answers on that. So I would not say that it's just something that the business is claiming to me and we have a discussion. It's already with me. So I already also have to figure out answers on that. But from a more kind of bigger and broader view, when we look into telecom, what really stands out, and I think that's important, when instability is out there, we also can give as a company stability. And that's one core value we can also give as telecom. So we stay true to who we are, and we also stay true to our values. And that's also often an answer we can give to the inside, but also to the outside.
I think that's great, because as you say, there's so much change going on. There's what do you hold true to and what do you keep as that sort of grounding, and then you build and respond around that. So I think that's great. Satinder, if we want to move on to the next question, I was going to, as global organizations, I think one of the things that you have to deal with is all the things that happen across the globe. And, you know, if I take kind of Europe and North America and APAC, they have different flavors around what's important to them at this times and what the narrative is that's happening there. And David, as we move into skills-based models, and I know we've spoken about a little bit about that, and we're going to go into the data. Is there anything that you in your organization that's cropping up from that different lens across geopolitically that creates challenges and opportunities?
From a geopolitical perspective, I think it picks up a little bit of what Miriam had just mentioned around that shifting and thinking about how you really do effectively offshore in many ways, and you know, how then do you begin to invest in some of the countries that are certainly where there is a bigger pool of talent. So I think certainly we are having more conversations in around, if we did shift to a more offshore approach, what impact does that have then on our capabilities and the skills, not just the costs, etc. And actually, I certainly believe that a shift, I think India is one of the areas I'm particularly interested in at the moment, because traditionally India has been used as a country to get cheaper labor. But actually, if you really think about some of the capabilities that we'll need as as organizations, from tech, UX, design, a whole heap, this is a really emerging talent pool, I think, for us. And actually, I see India much more as a bit of a capability play for organizations, actually building out better resource in more abundance than we've had previously before. I think that's really interesting, that actually, if we can dispel some of the potential myths that people have in around that, and actually you just look at the difference in numbers, 1.4 billion versus in the US, it's about 600 million. There's more talent there for us to begin to think about. That does also come with, you know, time zone challenges, all the stuff that are all more than useful. But I think certainly that's some of the stuff that we kind of need to kind of navigate and mitigate risks that's in there. And I certainly think from a where you want to look for your skills, it may not be in the Western world going forward at this point in time. So I think that's really interesting for organizations to kind of reconcile who that is. The EVP part that was mentioned also as well, I think, is also very important when you are thinking about skills in many ways. Is actually that needs to be completely congruent. It's no point in having a glossy external image saying you're going to do one thing, and actually then when the experience is very different internally. So certainly for us, we're trying to think about things as holistically as possible with that, and making sure that actually that experience, that exceptional experience that we should apply, should be consistent and should be happening no matter where you are in the world at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly see capability hubs being the thing. It's not a cost play anymore. It's a capability play, and that's sort of longer term rather than the short term cost only. That's certainly where we see more mature organizations going. Let's talk a little bit about workforce planning, and the dreaded word always comes up, because it is the thing, right? We have to plan. Planning is a word that's interesting in turbulence, because, you know, how far you can go out and what that means. So you had spoken a little bit about your data and some of the, we can now see how this is. Can you talk a little bit about how you're leveraging that data and analytics with specific relation to workforce planning?
So for us, when we've been thinking about how we move to a skills-based organization, it has always been deeply rooted in actually data and insight into our workforce. And when we thought about doing our skills-based approach, we've tried to do it as end-to-end as possible. So how do we deeply understand the skills that we have that will then inform what we need to hire for, what we need to develop to, and actually how does that then inform our future HR plans going forward, and ultimately the strategy and the contribution that we make. So we spent a lot of time actually getting to know our organization and really getting to understand what skills that we have in abundance, where there is deficit, and what are the opportunities and things that we need to do to be able to plug that deficit. And it's our build, buy, or bot strategy in many ways, if you like. But what that has done is really given a different shift in the conversations that we've been having with our business, because we're actually talking about real data, a taxonomy that gives us a real clear indication as to what skills that we do have that was created by the business. And it's given real validity to some of those conversations where we created this and we've run the model here, and this is what it's beginning. Okay, if we do nothing, this happens. If we scenario plan here, this is what this happens. Actually, when we look at the gap that we've got from what we want to achieve versus where we are now, we have to take a very different approach to either upskilling and reskilling, or indeed outsourcing, or indeed looking at different strategies to bring capability into our organization. And I think that's really been a light bulb moment for us as a HR function, because we've gone, crikey, actually data and insights isn't just about reporting on headcount and attrition rates. This is really about getting into the bones of our organization and making decisions based upon facts and based upon what we've created together with the business. And that's really shifted the relationship in some of the conversations. And we know where the senior HR folks are having those great conversations, the right decisions are being made, and much more strategic approach is being taken to the longer term size, shape, and constitution of our organization.
It's great, right? Because in many organizations, and it's still true, and wherever anyone's on the journey, and Miriam, I'm going to come to you because I know you've got some really interesting pilots on the go, but you were really honest about this and said, we certainly haven't cracked this, but I can tell you about pilots and where we go to from here. And I want to hear more about that. But I think, you know, for so long, the conversations have been sort of driven by business, and now it can actually be driven by data through HR really having that different conversation. And that, isn't that a lovely place to be? That has been a long time coming. Miriam, do you want to share some of those pilots that you had spoken about and what you're doing, and then what your sort of plans are in terms of thinking about workforce planning, where you are with that?
Yeah, and maybe I can just directly connect, because this kind of data topic is really something that is, of course, also driving us. And in the manner of hiring talents, that's a very crucial point. And what is currently really bringing us to collecting data on the one hand side for now to truly understand where are the people and what do they need. So coming from this kind of experience thinking, but also from this kind of hyper personalization. So that they come to us, we come to them, and this maybe also in different ways also comes, of course, with the data collection. This is where kind of this skill scrapping mode already somehow starts, right? Nevertheless, what also drives me is bringing then this crunch data and this better decision making also to the people that make those decisions. And these are oftentimes the hiring managers. So also thinking through how we can easily help our hiring managers to make good decisions upon skills, to understand what internal mobility means, to make good decisions on maybe candidates that are not perfect, but you can upskill them. So there is a whole lot of cultural aspect in there when we talk about workforce planning. But Sam, you were just mentioning, yes, we've not cracked it yet. And honestly, I also wanted to add in this conversation, planning is good, but currently how far can we still plan? So when, again, I look in my department, I was not aware 2 years ago that I need a software architect and that I have to build up a team in Ghana and in India. So I do recruiting. Why should I go for such extreme ways? And therefore, I also wanted to question a little bit, yes, disruption means planning, but how far right now can we plan in a way? So it's more like tendencies and understanding how we can stay upon that wave. So yes, we are not 100% there, but from a piloting perspective, we are trying to crack the nut with tools. And this is especially aidful that we are currently implementing, and we're not doing it just for recruiting. We're doing it for skill management and for resource management. And I think that's the twist also this tool needs, because then everything is somehow connected, and especially this kind of internal movement, the internal marketplace and the external topics are somehow then coming together.
Awesome. I was with the head of AI research for Microsoft a couple of weeks ago, Alexia, and just to bring both of your points home, we were talking about in her world, how have skills changed? Now, she has a data scientist who does a lot of the research, clearly. And the challenge to the data scientist was, in order to do more work, we need more data scientists. And the data scientist was like, well, no, I'm gonna train the LLM to be 3 data scientists, and I'm going to be the metadata scientist. So I think, Miriam, to your point, and that's exactly what he did, right? So he actually became the meta and created 3 data scientists. I think there's an interesting take on planning, on workforce being human and synthetic, which adds into our complexity. But I also think, to your point, there's a fluidity and agility that we see certainly with some of our clients working in workforce planning. We're used to be quite a sort of static, cumbersome process. We now see that happening in a more agile way based on data and analytics in real time. And so I think this is an area we have a watch. There's actually a question in the chat for you, David, so I'm just going to ask it while it's here. And the question is, which expertise does AXA XL acquire through outsourcing at the moment?
So through outsourcing in terms of our offshoring, or is it through third parties coming into?
Julia, I'm going to ask you to put in the chat, are you looking for third party, or are you looking for actual third parties? She's answered.
Third parties. So we've actually made a very conscious effort to reduce that, to be honest with you. It should be no surprise to you. We had a large part of our workforce that was in the technology space that was outsourced. And certainly we have made a conscious effort to reduce that for a number of different reasons, that's for sure. But certainly we have much more of a tendency now to think about how do we build our own talent and actually use greater internal mobility strategies to plug the gaps where we have. Now, of course, there are going to be some niche and specialist skills that we will always have to outsource, because they are so niche and rare, and you may not need them for a long time. But certainly, it's predominantly in the outsourcing in the technology space for things like underwriting, claims, finance. We definitely build our own talent in that particular space, because we see there is some great fungibility also as well of the workforce across that. And that's some of the really interesting conversations we're really getting into now. I know somebody's identity is A, but actually why couldn't they be B? Because the underlying skills that they have can completely transfer across with the right sport coaching and development. So hopefully that answers your question, but certainly I think ours is a distinct move away from outsourcing and consultancy to think about how we really leverage the talent in our organization and the skills they have. And we do that now because we've got a greater insight into what those actually are. It's not perfect, I would say. I don't want to herald that we've cracked it at all, but certainly it's given rise to much more open, honest dialogue conversations around actually, if we leverage our internal workforce more, we're able to plug gaps in projects quicker, get to production quicker. We're also able then to make sure that they are they can navigate and understand a very complex organization. So we see some real benefits of really majoring now actually on the internal mobility piece.
Which is also great, because we're with that coming away from this kind of job profile thing and really giving people several hats. We're doing the same. So closing the gap for my recruiters, for example, means that they are sometimes diagnostics people as well. So closing the gaps already starts there. So I like that, Rep.
And I think the jobs become more interesting.
Absolutely.
In my view, I think about the traditional role of the recruiter actually being involved in selection and assessment, workforce planning, coaching line managers, developing different candidate experiences, even employee experiences, makes those jobs far more valuable in my mind. And certainly where we've got that working well, the business are really feeling the benefit of that. So I think, particularly, I'll be biased, I've been in HR for a very long time, but I think they're becoming more interesting. I think we're beginning to really see where the power of value comes from. Great HR people that are thinking about how work and how we run an organization should be different to how we've done it traditionally before. And that's challenging, but also quite exciting in many ways, because those managers that get it quickly embrace it very quickly also as well.
Great, thank you. I will just add on to that, Julia. What we see in many organizations is when they are designing work, they are looking at what in the short term is human and how that will change. And if there are things in the shorter term that they think are actually going to be disrupted by AI, they're actually outsourcing those things. And then expecting partners to bring together the technology pieces, and then keeping internally, I get to your point, DJ, the critical skills that they want to have in their organization that are going to build the future. And I think that's what I heard from you as well, Miriam. So exciting.
Another way of putting it, Sam, definitely. Keep your critical skills in hand.
just what I'm hearing out there. So yeah. If we move, we've spoken a little bit about skills-based organizations, and I want to just dive in a little bit. You've given some examples of how it's going well. You've given some examples of data. Can I ask, it's a simple concept that's really challenging to get operationalized, right? And I talk about skills a great deal with clients. Is there a nugget of like, this was super challenging, this is what we learned, and this is what we would do differently when you're moving towards that? And I'm on the next question, Satinder, just if you are following along, just thank you. And Miriam, maybe I'll come to you and ask you first. Are there any things that you've kind of gone, gosh, that was super challenging, that's what, how and the lesson you've learned and how things have changed from that?
So we're in the midst of it. So as I stated, we're moving to Eightfold, and the heart of Eightfold is really looking into skills from like a skill management perspective, but also when you're hiring people. And what we truly see is that that's not an easy fix. So this is a cultural change you have to bring into your company. People need to understand that skills can develop. Skills are maybe not fully set yet. There is a little bit of a prediction in there. It's also about maybe not seeing the perfect CV candidate anymore. So there is a lot of things going on when you're sitting in that change. And of course, we are forcing then everyone to get away from these traditional approaches. But I would say we are not there yet. However, what I can say is we see that it has already a good effect in rethinking how we are hiring people and having the right conversations with the right people. So to kind of sum that up, what we are currently in is we have to build trust first. And if I go for the learnings that I can share, it's this skill first mindset we have to bring to the organization. It's often also by learning that even though it's something new, it can be good. And it's also the way of doing this iteratively. So we have not pushed a one-size-fits-all solution across full Deutsche Telekom. It's rather like that we're going country and NatGo by NatGo to also understand what they need, because there are variations when it comes to hiring for skills and doing this whole kind of shift and learning iteratively how we can utilize such tools in the best way, and maybe also what is still missing. And maybe hopping also to your comments, you were touching on that often if it can be done by AI, it somehow is outsourced. We as Deutsche Telekom has made a complete different decision on that. We brought it in-house. So I build those AI assistants on my own, so I can change them, twist and tweak them, connect them with another. And that helps a lot to not just focus then when it comes to skills on tools itself, again, focus on the experience that is necessary to hire for skills. And that comes with hiring managers, that comes with candidates. All of them somehow need an experience, and that differs often a lot from one to another.
Miriam, thanks. I'm going to pick up on 4 things you said there, which I think are incredible lessons learned, and I will double down on those from what I hear in the market. First is this is a culture and mindset change, and it's a change. Yeah. And often we don't think of it. Often the tools are the things we focus on, and they are super important, but it's not that. The second thing you said was, if you don't have trust, you actually won't get anywhere. And we experience that over and over and over and over again whenever we talk to clients. And then you spoke about there are variations and therefore iterations. And that's how we see people move faster, even though it may feel like they're moving slower, certainly in organizations. So I would kind of validate from what we hear. I will ask you, David, your thoughts as well. And then I just want to clarify something I said in AI, because I don't want it to be misconstrued, because I think you should build your own AI assistants is what I want to say. We don't see people outsourcing that. We see them outsourcing the work that they know AI is going to change. But yeah.
Got it.
Perfect. Thank you, Miriam. David?
I mean, wholeheartedly agree. Don't underestimate the level of change effort you need into putting into this, telling the story, getting the buy-in, getting the trust. And I think that's one of the things I think that we tripped up on in the first few months really of our process to really introduce skills into the organization. We really did underestimate actually the reaction to what we were proposing in terms of change. People are still fundamentally rooted in their identity of either the degree that they studied in, their background, or indeed their job title. And when you start to deconstruct and think about things differently and actually challenge, actually, how does that job actually work, or why do we have this team? That does create a level of fear and anxiety within your organization. So I would say we underestimated that level of feeling. From a logical, rational perspective, you can explain why skills is a good thing. The reality of it is you're dealing with people's identity and with their tribes and what they've worked very hard to be able to. So we certainly would, if anybody else embarking out on this journey, you have to really think about that journey, and you can't force it onto people. You need to let it permeate. You need to let people really get used to what it is that you're trying to do, and play sometimes with those concepts as well. The notion of co-creation, I think, was also one of the things I think that we did well as part of this. So actually, rather than top down and forcing, here's what skills that you need, let's play with it and actually work together with the various different areas that we had certainly in the early days, like how we co-created with them, what good looks like. What does success look like in your team in the context of skills, and what does that mean then actually in terms of what we need then also for the future? And let's start to play with that. And I think that was a really good moment for us. I think also if I take it from a team perspective, you also need to manage your own resilience as part of that. Not only just the pushback, but actually this is big and it's complex, and actually you make mistakes as you go along the way, and how you respond to that and how you adjust to that is a really important piece. And my last point is, I would encourage anybody thinking about this, is that you do need to try and think about it as in the most holistic of ways. And I think I would have liked to have started earlier on actually really thinking about what our upskill, reskill agenda is and how we make sure that's much more robust. Because once you give people insight into what they're good at, what skills they have, what's in abundance, and then wherefore those gaps be, you need to work quite quickly then to kind of try and fill those gaps, or at least give them opportunities in which to fill those gaps there. So it's been such an interesting journey last kind of 18 months that we've been on. We've still got a long way to go, but certainly I think don't underestimate the time and change that's needed to be able to do this. You need to really work with your business to get them on board. And I think for us, that our secret of success was co-creation. And look at it as holistically as you possibly can. And don't forget the learning components of this, because if you say to somebody your skills are potentially obsolete, and there's some lovely statistics out there that kind of say the shelf life of skills is exponentially kind of reducing. Well, you need to have something then to help fill those gaps, I think, otherwise you end up with the risk of destabilizing your entire organization. So hopefully that's helpful.
Great. I think as we move into the last question, it's a perfect segue. And then I do want to please put in the chat if you have questions, anybody on the call, or we can leave some time. But I think there's this, we talk about unlearning a lot, because we talk about skilling and learning, but you have cognitive overload. And so paring that back and then filling the gap is really important, as you say, David. I was listening to Daniel Susskind, who has just written a book on growth the other day. And I think you touched on something that also really is helpful. And he talks about organizations, and he was talking about countries, but he was saying the response to failure, if the response is learning or the response is shame, those two things create a very different environment for innovation and change.
Yeah.
And it's really important that you have a look at a micro and macro level, what does your organization do when something doesn't do what it was designed supposed to within the, does it see it as learning and take that, or does it see it as failure and someone goes, well, what was that? And that creates a very different environment. Yeah. Just on that, and Miriam, I'll come to you first. We're in this, like, looking ahead, and David, you touched on resilience. Miriam, you've touched on a few things that you've already spoken about, the skills and what you would look for in your organization. Are there critical shifts that HR and talent people need to, what are the skills, what do they have to do to be resilient and future-proof? So what would you say those are?
Well, I tweak that question a little bit. And what I see that is a very critical shift for HR is, again, and that's what has been very crucial for us in hiring talent, is moving away from being a recruiting department to developing recruiting products. So what do I mean with that? It really means that we as a department, for example, move directly into being an agile department with product increment plannings, with Scrum, with flight levels, really with outcomes instead of outputs. And this made it for us able to build products. And if I speak about products, we of course have processes and tools we have to bring somewhere, but in the overall end, building products means that you listen to your stakeholders. And that's something from a critical shift I see in HR we more often have to do, because we're so focused on automation or making processes easier, but we are often missing listening to the ones that are using those processes. And if I look to this kind of topic, I would say that this is also the key to really find answers to this complex global environments, because when you listen, you're going to learn iteratively, as I've stated, you're going to gather a lot of feedback, and that made it easier for you to understand where skills land, where you have to have further conversations, where there is a misunderstanding, or where the kind of trust and culture has not evolved yet. So it's a complex thing, I would say, and it does not mean that agility is always the answer to it, but kind of taking this product development idea really into consideration also in HR should and could be a very, very good shift towards a good future.
Amazing. I love the outputs to outcomes, because I think that's really important, right? Because we often measure by outputs today, and actually outcomes are slightly different, and it allows much more fluidity and freedom. But and you have stated it over, and there's a thread throughout, Miriam, it's what you've then put into your organization to become product led. There's a different skills than what you may have had in the past, and that's allowed you to evolve. So
yeah,
great example. David, anything?
I think from my perspective, and this isn't kind of rocket science, and it probably sounds a little obvious, but one of the critical shifts I think that HR need to do is not be second in actually being driving the unlearn and the upskill agenda within the function. Too often I see where HR functions are really driving it through within their business areas that they're supporting, really doing everything that's needed, and they're forgetting themselves. And I think certainly ever more, I think it's really important that a HR function is continuing to really think about how it supports and upskills everyone within the function. I think that's a critical shift that we absolutely have to make. I don't think I think there was a question in the chat that kind of says, we should never be underestimating the value of those people skills, the ability to really invest time in creating cultures and environments where people can really thrive. We bring a lot of that as a HR function. We're just going to do it differently, and we're going to do it with that product mindset. We're going to do it actually driving it through data and insight, and that balance, right, and investment in ourselves, I think, is a critical shift that we absolutely have to make. I also think there is a little bit here around, and I was just thinking about kind of the experience I've had over the last kind of nearly 2.5 years is that there is something about how we hold our nerve a little bit here as well, and change that dynamic with the business where they expect us to come with all the answers. And quite often we want to fill that gap for them because that's where we feel like we're adding value. How do we really hold our nerve a little bit and perform that role really as a coach and advisor, so the business really begin to see like the people agendas as something that actually is a business critical factor to them, rather than it being a HR problem or a HR thing. So those are two of the things that I'm really thinking about at the moment, is how do we make sure we really make investment in our HR team to be able to navigate this area, but also making sure that we are changing that dynamic with the business, that it's actually HR is not really about HR, it's about them as leaders and managers to drive forward the right outcomes.
I love that. I love the, like, this is a critical, it's a business thing, right? And we just happen to be a custodian of that. Yeah. I will give a bit of companies balancing investing in AI. I'm going to give a little bit of a, maybe I'm going to be a little bit shocking and controversial here. So given my last conversations, but what I wanted to say was, we actually, I talk to a lot of people who are they are pushing the boundaries. And so please know this is where this comes from, because not everyone needs to push the boundaries and not everyone should be in the boundary pushing. But I'm going to give you some insight into some global leaders who are really pushing the boundaries on this, and how some of the highly disruptive organizations. And I was recently at TED in Vancouver having a conversation with a CIO CHRO track. So we bring those two together for obvious reasons. And given the question in the chat, I thought this might be relevant. And actually the word HR will no longer exist, right? Because that's not what we do. So language is powerful. What we call ourselves is actually really powerful in organizations. So are we going to see chief work officers? Are we going to see chief human and machine orchestrators? What are we going to see as what that is? And I leave that with you to, I don't think anyone's landed on that. We're still known as HR today in most places, but that was what will this be? Because that should denote the kind of work and the outcomes, Miriam, back to your point, that we actually want to achieve, rather than, oh, we do this. I am going to tell you that in speaking to non-HR leaders and HR leaders, HR has a very important role of making sure that as humanity, we do a great job, and we have great work, and we do work with machines. Yeah. And that's not HR's job, but it's one of the voices that's really important. When I talk to leaders, they go, well, when the cost of AI becomes less than the cost of HR, that's what history tells us clicks over things. Yeah.
Turning point, right?
So I just want to bring that to, it's something we need to think about, and we need to have our hand on the wheel of the cost of labor and how that changes the dynamic, and what do we want to do with that. And when that clicks over, what will happen unless we are very clear about our mandate.
And how far we can also drive that, and also under the estimate of how far we can also bring ourselves or get ourselves seamless in this whole ecosystem. So this is something I at least hear from you, Sam, to be more like a little more edgy on those questions and discuss them really very powerful, because everything that is currently happening kind of drives us on the one hand side, but on the other hand side, we also have it in our hands. So how would we like to create such a future? Is it really seamless, or do we really be more like AI assistants an assistant next to the AI assistant? So how this is going to look like, and this is very disruptive. So yeah,
and really important for your organizations to decide. The question in the chat. So the only question I can see in the chat is the one on how can companies balance investing in AI with valuing essential people skills. It was our attempt, I guess, to cover some of that. Nina, if there's anything deeper that you wanted to ask on that we didn't cover, please let us know. Are there any other questions? Anyone can drop something in the chat that they want to ask. I am toggling between the two. And Satinder, if you see anything that I can't see, because clearly I am technologically challenged with WebEx every time, please let me know, and I can take that. So because we have 12 minutes to have a conversation with those on the call. Whilst people are thinking about putting things in the chat, I guess I also wanted to, we've spoken about so many things in the kind of turbulent space, and we've spoken about skills, we've spoken a bit about work planning, we've spoken about the environment you're in, and we've spoken about where the world of HR will be in the future. Is there anything from a personal perspective, and I go back to that you have experienced, the two of you, being part of this? So you're a leader in this and shaping and influencing, but if I take you out of your leadership role as such and into people who this is happening to, is there anything at a personal level that you think, gosh, that's really been weighing on my mind, or something I've been thinking about at a personal level and therefore would take into organization? Anything that stands out to you?
I think from a personal perspective, I mean, I just did a quick calculation in my head. I think I've been now 28 years working in HR.
Bad times, David Jones. You know,
it is. The highlights prove it. And I think there is fundamentally, I think, where I've kind of woken up in the middle of the night on this one, is gone, oh God, what does this actually mean for all of that hard work and experience and study and all those kind of things? What does this really mean for me? And am I past it in many ways? You do get those thoughts in your head. So I have thought about that, and I've seen it when I've worked with the businesses and some of our underwriters. We have quite a mature population here within the organization. You can see that wrestle about, actually, am I obsolete? And skills is often spoken about, skills becoming obsolete, all of those kind of good things. So it has been a personal reflection of mine, and something you just want to get more comfortable with, but it's not easy as such, because you've done things in a certain way. You rely a little bit more on your personal skills. I would always say, well, I'm not a data person, etc. So I think there's some interesting internal reconciliations that I've had to kind of do and really embrace and enjoy the data side, as well as think about then how do I use then my human skills to really enhance those kind of things. But certainly there's been a few moments where I've gone and go, oh my goodness, actually, am I now obsolete?
I think that's really powerful, because you're not alone in feeling that, right? And so I think sometimes letting ourselves feel the things that are going on in our organization is really powerful, because I think experienced people are thinking that. Does that mean all my hard work, toil, the way I did things is just eradicated, and that no longer holds weight? I think that's, and then you actually often get people who sort of dig their heels in and go, well, that cannot be true, and I won't let that be true, and therefore, and so, I mean, the fact that you're sharing and obviously thinking about that, but I think it's really powerful. Miriam, is there anything from your perspective?
So I would say that you can feel the overwhelming emotions that are in your teams. So you have to somehow be the one who is, again, on the wave, kind of doing your thing. But on the other hand side, you have to stay authentic, but also empathetic. And I feel like even though we are handling so much technology, the humans are currently even more important to kind of bring those two worlds always together. And the one thing that keeps me busy is I always feel like I'm already outdated. So whenever we have a good new idea and whenever we bring something new into the organization, I already feel like it's already again outdated, because that speed with whatever is currently just happening out there just makes me go a little crazy, or also brings some anxiety from the leader's perspective. And then having this kind of emotional things that are happening in your teams, bringing them always together with that speed, I think that's a stretch. That's a stretch, and maybe it's already a new skill we are learning. And I have not been taught on, and I currently just learn along the road.
I think you bring up such an important point. Anyone who is in any form of team, looking after people in any way, shape or form, that has evolved so much. And Miriam, I don't think it's something that people are sort of brought through. It tends to be not how we promote people. And as you say, they're in where anxiety is prevalent and emotion is high, and you've got technology and you've got things to get done, that's a really hard space to be. And so giving back to yourselves in that is really important, around a bit of nurturing and how you actually deal with that. And I think part of that is sharing with others. So I mean, this is actually one of those things, is how do you share that we kind of all go, it's not perfect, and how do we get on? So I think that's super powerful, Miriam. Okay. I do have a question in the chat. So some examples of successful skills-based hiring or hiring models, and any indicators of early indicators of success of prioritizing skills over experience. Miriam, is there anything you want to touch on? And then David, will kind of close with you on that.
I would give it to David, as he's more experienced on that, running pilots, and we're trying to get there.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, I think from me, I've got some nice examples of where we've used it in our underwriting space, where we've actually, so underwriting is a very technical skill to have, and the ability to underwriting is a process, and you have to have some knowledge on the product or the service. But the actual skills that make successful underwriters are those people skills and those business skills, ability to be financially astute, the ability to influence, the ability to build relationships, the ability to diagnose, etc. So we're really working hard now on our underwriting pathways. We pride ourselves on being a technical organization, and we're actually going into the organization where we have assistants that deal with admin and process, and we've spotted those skills that are, we believe, make the differentiator for the underwriters, and then we put them through an underwriting pathway, upskill, reskill agenda. They do it in addition to their job, which I think is also very interesting in this particular instance. So it's almost, I describe it as almost like underwriting night school, but it's not. But it's certainly in addition to that, because it's there to help them build up their confidence and their knowledge, etc. in that way. So I think it's where the marriage between knowing your individuals and then giving them great learning to actually accelerate where you are from there. The other piece, which we're still embryonic in as well, I also think skills will also play out very nicely in the early career space, because actually you're bringing in people with zero knowledge and zero experience in many ways. But if you find those GMs with the right attitude, aspiration, and the skills from the early careers pool, I think you open up your talent pools most definitely. But also I think we're going to see some really good successes in there, that if you get that right, you could really build some talent of the future that is will make a difference to us as an organization. Those are the two things that kind of instantly sprung to my mind.
I like that, David, because it often comes with this willingness. So when I look to the experiences we've made, if you may have the skill, but you also don't see opportunities that are out there, and you're kind of staying curious and willing to maybe take a chance or something new, I think that very heavily plays into that as well.
I agree. I think that is yes, go on.
So I was just saying, and we've got some real life examples of, you know, a master mariner, a homicide prosecutor, an art gallery curator, and a jazz pianist coming into our organization to come and do underwriting based upon those underlying skills that we have there. So there are some really nice examples, and I won't do any spoilers for some of the work we want to do to promote that, but certainly you'll see you're interested where we're going to try and major in on that, to say actually insurance is a very accessible place to go, because we value the whole person and the skills that they bring from all of the wonderful richness of them and their lives. So
I think that what a wonderful tapestry. Can't wait to hear more about that in your, yes, lovely. That is a brilliant place to close. I just thank you so much, David, Miriam, for sharing. Thank you for those who are on the call. I'm going to leave you with this. So as we were talking about emerging talent and then feeling like, you know, I'm least relevant or obsolete, which definitely not. But so neuroplasticity in those emerging skills is very high. It absolutely declines with age. Clearly, in everybody, that's a different pace. However, as you get older, one of the things that you can do to stimulate neuroplasticity is do power naps and walks during the day. So I leave you with that as how you'd like to build that into your work design and think about that. It has been a pleasure hosting you. Thank you to everyone who has joined. Thank you again, David, Miriam. If you want to hear anything more, please reach out to us. We are always happy to talk to any of you about what we hear across the globe in our wonderful tapestry of global clients. And have a very good day, evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are in the world.
Bye. Thanks a lot.